the goal is now just to walk you through how you can read and understand the test report, and then we will also give you some guidance on how you can turn those insights into action, since you know the value of this test is not just knowing your numbers and seeing the results, but also understanding what it means and how you can influence it in the right direction. So if we just start at the very top, here you see an example of what it will appear like to the user, depending on two opposing examples as you see here. And just to emphasize that these zones, they are directional indicators. They don't diagnose any disease, but they can show you where your biology is sitting on this continuum from strain to resilience or from a low to a high index. And this is important because it keeps interpretation anchored in preventive health. So just understand that the results are intended to guide understanding and action and not classification of disease. So let's start with the first marker, and then we will walk through all of them one by one with the overall goal of just understanding not just the numbers, but what they mean and what they are saying about your microbiome and how it is interacting with your metabolism. So the first thing you will see is your gut health index, and this one combines all the key ratios together with your total IPA level to show the overall balance between your microbial support and your immune metabolic activity. And this marker, you can think of it as an overall summary of something very complex. So if your score is green, it's high or medium high, this means that your microbiome is showing stronger protective activity and a relatively low immune tone. But if it's in the lower end, it doesn't mean that it's something necessarily wrong, but it means that your biology is showing room for improvement, which you can do with your diet and your lifestyle. So the first specific marker on your report, and maybe the most important one, is your IPA level. IPA is, like you probably have heard many times now, exclusively microbial, and this means that your human cells, it can't produce it. So when it's present in your blood and in higher levels, it reflects that you have an active microbial metabolism and a well-supported gut environment. So a higher IPA value here means that your microbes are actively producing this beneficial metabolite, and this is a great sign that you have a nourished and fiber-supported gut. If you get moderate IPA, it means that there is some microbial activity, but you still have room to strengthen it, which you typically can do by increasing your fermentable fiber sources and polyphenol-rich foods in your diet. If you get a low IPA level, this can indicate you have lower microbial support, and this could often likely be from low fiber intake and low diversity. So the next marker is the IPA to kynurenine ratio, or our microbiome immune support marker. And this one reflects the relative balance we have between these two opposing pathways of tryptophan metabolism. On one hand, we have the one driven by your gut microbiota that produces IPA, and on the other hand, we have the one driven by your body's immune and stress-related enzymes that produces kynurenine. So if you get a higher ratio here, it indicates that your microbial activity is proportionally stronger relative to the immune-related metabolism. And this is a trend that is seen both in the literature and also in our database, with a higher ratio tending to aligning with higher fiber intake, favorable omega-3 balance, and more stable immune profiles. But a lower ratio, on the other hand, signals that you have immune-related tryptophan metabolism that is relatively more active than your microbial metabolism. And this is a pattern that is often seen in conditions of immune activation or psychological stress or specifically reduced microbial support. And then we have the IPA to tryptophan ratio, our gut microbiome efficiency marker. And this one shows how efficiently your gut microbiota converts tryptophan into IPA. So if you have a higher ratio here, it indicates that you have stronger microbial conversion activity relative to the total tryptophan availability. And this pattern is typically seen with the individuals that have higher fiber intake and greater microbial diversity, which are both factors that we know are important to promote beneficial indole production. If you get a moderate or lower ratio here, it suggests that you have less tryptophan that is being channeled through these microbial routes. And this can occur if you have low fiber intake, reduced microbial diversity, or there are periods of psychological or immune stress that will redirect your metabolism so that it is steered more heavily towards kynurenine production. Next, we have the kynurenine to tryptophan ratio, or our immune stress indicator. And this ratio describes how much of your available tryptophan is being converted into kynurenine, which is the route that we know becomes more active when the immune response enzymes are more engaged. So if you get a higher ratio here, it reflects that there is stronger activation of this pathway relative to tryptophan availability. And this is also a well-established marker in research, and it is also known to rise during periods of immune activation and oxidative stress. So a lower ratio here indicates that you have a calmer immune tone and greater availability of tryptophan for alternative routes, including this beneficial indole production. So this ratio, it provides a dynamic snapshot of your current immune metabolic balance. And we see also in scientific literature, as well as in our internal data, that individuals that have higher fiber intake, they have a strong omega-3 protection, so a good ratio between omega-3 and omega-6, and lower systemic stress. These people, they generally show lower kynurenine to tryptophan ratios, and this is consistent with reduced immune strain and a more balanced tryptophan metabolism. So when you reach the bottom of the report, you will see this table here with the quantitative metabolite values, which are the actual measured concentrations of these metabolites. And these numbers, they are presented with a target range. And I just want to take a moment to explain what this target range really means, because this is important. And the first thing I want you to know is that there is a difference between what is biologically normal and what we consider optimized. So the biological normal values, they reflect what's commonly seen in the general population and in published research. But our internal reference group is based on people with higher fiber intake and stronger omega-3 protection, which consistently show tighter patterns that aligns with calmer immune profiles and stronger microbial activity. So those optimized ranges are what you see in the target ranges on the report. So if a result falls outside of this target window, it doesn't have to mean that something is wrong. It simply means that the biology hasn't yet shifted towards the optimal metabolic balance. So for instance, a kynurenine level of 2 micromolars can be entirely normal because it's within the biologically normal values, but it is above our target range. So this suggests that the immune pathway is still moderately active. It's not a clinical concern, but it helps to point to an opportunity for improvement that you can do through your diet and your lifestyle. So you can view these values in two ways. Firstly, it provides context that helps to give transparency that allows you to compare the values with published scientific literature. But most importantly, it's serving as your personal baseline for future tracking. So you can see if there is even small shifts over time. For instance, if you have stable tryptophan levels and you see rising IPA and a slight drop in kynurenine, this can show you a measurable improvement in your gut immune cooperation. But of course, it's very important to stress this, that in order to ensure accurate comparison, the test should always be taken under similar conditions. It should be taken fasted in the morning and preferably not after heavy exercise or excessive alcohol consumption. So basically, the values you see in this table here, they are the real biochemical data, and the target ranges that you see next to them, they represent what is achievable when the body and the microbiome are in balance. And this is also the goal of the test, is to help you guide an understanding and help you translate your gut chemistry into into clear and actionable insights. And this brings me to the next part, which is about how you can turn those insights into actions, because this is also where the real value is. It's helping you understand how to influence your biology in the right direction. So if your results show that you have lower IPA, this suggests that your gut bacteria are producing less of this beneficial indole metabolite. It reflects that your microbial ecosystem is probably not fully supported by your diet yet. We know that IPA production, it depends on cross-feeding between specific gut microbes, which are fueled primarily by fermentable fibers and plant-based substrates. So when IPA is on the lower side, you should focus on feeding those beneficial bacteria. And you can do this by increasing your intake of soluble and fermentable fibers, which you can get from oats or barley, inulin-rich vegetables, legumes, and diverse resistant starch sources. Diversity is also important. We know that combining different types of fiber sources helps to create overlapping microbial niches that will help to boost your indole production. And polyphenols, which you can find in berries, olive oils, different herbs and teas, they also act like these microbial selectors that helps to enrich these species that are important for converting tryptophan into IPA. So if you pair fiber intake with these plant compounds, it helps to amplify the effect. But most importantly, I would say consistency is very important, because your microbes and your bacteria in your gut, they adapt to what you eat most of the time and not just what you eat every now and then. So you should always aim for a steady daily fiber exposure rather than just these occasional bursts. And also, of course, your omega-3s are also important, since they help to support a balanced immune communication, which then also helps to create this gut environment that is favorable for indole producing species. If your results show higher kynurenine, on the other hand, this usually reflects that the immune system has been a bit more engaged. It could be from an infection, it could be from stress, or just lack of recovery. So it's part of your body's normal adaptive response, because we know kynurenine is produced when enzymes like IDO1 or TDO are activated, which is often by stress hormones or pro-inflammatory cytokines. But what is important is that you help the system reset so it doesn't stay elevated unnecessarily long. And what helps with this is, firstly, you can support balanced immune activity through your diet by prioritizing omega-3 fatty acids, reducing processed oils that are rich in omega-6, and also include lots of colorful plants that gives you antioxidants and polyphenols. And next, managing physiological stress is important. Poor sleep or high psychological stress or even overtraining, it can all help to push tryptophan more heavily into kynurenine. So if you support rest, recovery, and relaxation, this can also help you shift your metabolism back into balance. And also here, fiber is important, because we know fermentable fibers and short-chain fatty acid production can contribute to suppressing this inflammatory signaling, which will indirectly lower the IDO1 activity, which allows more tryptophan to reach the microbial route and not be steered excessively towards kynurenine. So what's important here is that you also understand that higher kynurenine results doesn't have to be bad per se, since it's a snapshot of a system under load. But what's important is that we have to bring this back down, and so it doesn't stay elevated unnecessarily long. And what all of this means for your daily life is basically that your microbiome and your metabolism is not something that is fixed. It is something that responds to everything that you do. So in order to influence this, you can start simple by eating a variety of plant fibers, which we will get from fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. Also adding polyphenol-rich foods and balancing your fats, managing stress, and sleeping well and moving regularly all influence this. And I think when you listen to all of these listed together, it sounds familiar, because these are all the fundamentals of what a healthy lifestyle really is. So what the science of tryptophan metabolism really shows us is why these basics are so important. It's not just generic wellness advice, but it's the actual biological levers that helps to tune your gut and your metabolism and your immune communication into balance. And then I can give the word to Sebastian.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna be a bit more practical to sort of guide because we talk a lot about you should eat fermentable fibers, you should eat this and that. But what does that actually mean? So when we look at the population in general in the Western world, we eat about 20 grams of fiber on average. And the target intake is 30 grams of fiber. In your diet, if we go to the next slide, 30 grams of fiber uh, looks like this. So here you have suggestions on 3 days. And if you're on your mobile phone, it can be hard to read, but it's about 4 deciliters of broccoli, 2.5 deciliters of carrot, 1.7 deciliters of dry oats that you then can make into oatmeal, for example. A medium apple, a tablespoon of chia seeds, 20 almonds, and 1 tablespoon of grounded flax seeds. That is, for example, what you need in one day. And then when you look at these slides, you see a lot of different sources to fiber. And that is because the recommendation is to eat 20 to 30 different sources per week. We know that most people don't reach this, and it can feel daunting. And that's where Synabiotic comes in. Synabiotic consists of 8 different sources of fiber, so wide variety. It's about 9 grams in 2 scoops, and it targets your microbiota with soluble fibers and resistant starches. And keep in mind that this is to top up. It's not your only source of fiber. So that we need proper food as a base, and then we top up with Synabiotic. And I will show you some data in a second. Then we have our energy bar, because when we talk about fibers, there are different sources of fibers, and it can get really technical fast. So when we look at Synabiotic, it's for your microbiome. Your energy bar, it consists of some fiber for your microbiome, but also this fiber is called insoluble fiber that helps with bowel movements and so on. So these products complement each other. And here you have 6 different sources of fiber. Moving on. Then if we want to see what happens then if we go from the 20 grams to 30 grams of fibers, and why do we target 30 grams of fiber? That is that when you look at different fiber intakes in a population, you can see that if you eat 14 grams of fibers on average throughout the year, compared to if you eat 20 grams of fiber on average per year, when it comes to your IPA production, nothing much happens. But if you go from those 20 to 29 grams of fibers in this case, you see a big jump in your IPA production because you need to get to 30 grams of fiber to sufficiently feed your microbiome. And when you compare this to our test, and we look at IPA level, you can see that if you get to those 30 grams of fibers, you won't get the perfect result, but you will get to medium high, so you will get green. And then when we look at Synabiotic, does Synabiotic work? And this is observational data, it's non-adjusted. But here we can see when we just look if people that has taken the test say if they take Synabiotic or not, we see that the median has 0.91 in our data if they do not take Synabiotic, whereas they get to 1.3, so a little below medium high if they take Synabiotic. But the devil is in the details. So we know that people take Synabiotic in differing amounts and not always consistently. And we see that for the median person, once you get to 1.5 scoops of synabiotic per day, you get to 1.4, which is that you get to green in on our test for IPA. And I would see IPA as your equivalent of your omega-3 index. So if there's something to focus on the test that really moves when you take our product, focus on IPA level, because that would tell you if your fiber intake is enough, if your gut microbiome um, environment and diversity supports fermenting these fibers into beneficial metabolites, in this case, IPA. Yes. And then I would also like to mention that when we look here, these are median values, and we do see that there is quite big differences between people, and that has likely to do with all the other things in your life and in your biology that affects fiber or your IPA levels and your microbiome. So what we see is that on average, there is quite a big shift using synabiotic, but there are individual differences, and that's why it's so important to test and see what works for you and then adjust accordingly.